Barbara Jean Lindsey is an internationally acclaimed psychic, spiritual healer, author, and founder of the online mystery school, Esoteric University. As the Cosmic Oracle, she is a conduit to the powers that be to answer your questions about your future self, past lives, current career, love. She shines light into the darkness to illuminate what was, what may be, and beyond. The readings and advice given by Barbara Jean Lindsey are for entertainment purposes only, should not take the place of any medical, legal, or financial advice given to you by a qualified professional, and are not a substitute for medical, legal, or financial advice. If you need a doctor, call a doctor. If you need to be expanded, call the Cosmic Oracle.
Hello and welcome everyone to the Cosmic Oracle Show. This is your host, Barbara Jean Lindsey. And we have already started having technical difficulties on Facebook. So I'm glad you're here on Revolution Radio. And I'm really happy to be here. It's Friday. It is May 15th, 2020. And we have for you a guest that I'm really excited to have on the show. Of course, I'm always excited about all my guests, right? But this is Preston Dennett, and we're going to be talking about one of his latest books that just came out, and it's about schoolyard UFO incident. So we'll be bringing him on shortly, and I think you're going to love him as much as I do, and about his amazing work. He's author of over 26 books already. So, I mean, the guy's a hardworking researcher and author and a ghost hunter and a out-of-body explorer, and he's pretty amazing. And so I really feel fortunate to bring him onto the show today. And I'm going to try and be working on how to get it going on Facebook. So I'm not sure what's going on with that. It just totally kicked me out. So it says my camera is not supported by a current browser. So I went ahead and redid everything, and it's still not working out. So I'm not sure what's going on with it. Maybe I'll just get lucky. I don't know. So, and we'll be getting Preston into the show in just a few moments. And so in the meantime, we'd like to thank you for giving generously to keeping Revolution Radio on the air all these years. And the way you can continue to do that is if you could just go ahead and go to freedomslips.com. That's freedomslips.com, and hit that donate button and give whatever you can. $5, $10 to keep us on the air would be amazing. We need about $2,000 a month to keep us up and running. And so far, you guys, we've made it every month, just barely, but we do it. So thanks to you again for giving generously in the past and continuing to give here on Revolution Radio. And I'll tell you a little bit about Preston. Before we bring him onto the show, I do want to let my friends know on Facebook that there's something going on. They just won't let me get to my camera for some reason. I don't know why. I know we have a lot of people waiting to hear me talk about this. So I'm just going to let them know that we are having technical difficulties. Okay. So I'll just let them know that. And I should let them know to just come on over to Revolution Radio, right? And if we can't do it that way, we can come in and do it this way. So let's see here. I'll have them come in and I'll repost this is what I'll do. So let me do that right now. Okay, so that they can come ahead and tune in, all my Facebook friends. Oh, they're going to be so disappointed, Pace, that they can see you here. So I think it's important to hear what Preston has to say and talk about the schoolyard incidents. Over 100 stories. He has over 100 stories that he's produced in his one book. So I think it's important to have him on and see his work. So he'll be coming on in just a few minutes. He's driving home from work, and then he assured me that he will be here, and he will. So I'm just going to post that in Facebook. There it goes now. I'll let them know that I'm having difficulties. So, all right. So now that that's all handled, right? So we're going to see where Preston is. There he is. And let's see what's going on. Add to call. All right. So I don't see that he's in yet. And so I do want to tell you a little bit about him, though. Let me give that background. Oh, you are here. Okay, Preston. Wonderful. Okay, let's add you to the call then. And I think you're here. Hi, Preston. Welcome to the show. Hello. Okay, so just nothing's 2 or 3 on the. Hello, Preston. Let's close that. Let's see. Let's see what else is going on. Can we hear you, Preston? Okay, let's change that. Okay, just a second, everybody. Here we go. It's let's see, 2 of 3 in the call, not on this call. Okay, so we want to go back. We're going to add. Let's see it here. Preston Dennett here. We're going to add. There we go. Add to the call. So this should do it. I have a good feeling about this call. So calling. There you are.
I'm here.
Oh my God. I'm so glad you are. We are not able to go on to Facebook. It has a technical difficulty with my camera, they said, and so I'm not able to be doing it live on Facebook, but we can do it here on Revolution Radio. So I guess we'll work with that, won't we?
Hey.
Why not, right?
We do what we can.
We do what we can. I'm really bummed about it, though, because I was really looking forward. I know we had a lot of people with questions for you, too, and all of your work. I mean, over 26 books. Let me give our listeners here on Revolution Radio a little bit of background about you, Preston. You began investigating UFOs and the paranormal in 1986 when you discovered that your family and friends and coworkers were having dramatic, unexplained encounters. And since then, you've interviewed hundreds of witnesses and investigated a wide variety of paranormal phenomena. You're a field investigator still? Are you still a field investigator for the Mutual UFO Network?
I don't actively, research cases for them. I do have this status. I did take the test.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still support MUFON. I think they're a great organization.
They are. That's how I met you, was through Lorian, through San Francisco and her MUFON organization and the UFO Con 2020.
Yeah, it was a great convention.
Yeah.
Last one I've done in a while.
I think it's going to be, we just barely got under the coronavirus, right? Under that fire. It felt good that we were able to pull that off right before. I don't think there's been a group gathering since then.
Yeah, I've had to cancel a few things, and things have been canceled on me. So, What are you going to do?
You're just going to roll with it. That's what we're going to do, right?
Right.
So I want to thank you for being on the show today. And I mean, all the work that you do, you're a ghost hunter, a paranormal researcher, And an author of over 26 books. Where do you find the time, man? I mean, that's a lot of dedication to paranormal research. It really is.
Hey, I appreciate that. But when you're having fun, that helps a lot.
Yeah, when you're following your passion, right?
Exactly. It does cut into my TV time. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, I call my show. I've been doing this every Friday night for like 5 years, and I call it my boyfriend. So, because it's something I have a date every Friday night, But it is something that's just a part of you, and if you're going to explore for yourself, you might as well then give it to the rest of humanity what your findings are, right?
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of great UFO researchers out there, and they're, I love them. I love them to death, but they're not getting their stuff out there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, that's what. Well, with all of your articles too, you wrote for Nexus magazine. That's one that I remember. I don't have all my notes here, but what I wanted to talk about today too is I have a sister who had her first UFO encounter, ET encounter, in 6th grade in her schoolyard. And so,
wow.
Yeah. And she's seen me go through all of this for the last 30 years. And when she told me that story, I said, well, I'm going to have Preston Dennett on. And he has this amazing book called Schoolyard UFO Encounters, where you have over 100 or 100 true accounts of aliens on the playgrounds and ETs at school. And so she's listening in tonight, and so I'm going to dedicate it to my sister. She's been through all of this with me. As you know, when you're going through this, your whole family kind of get involved somehow, right?
Yeah. It was tough for them too.
Yes, yeah. Like mine said, go get a real job, too. But you are an amazing writer. I read didn't quite finish it yet, but the one I'm into for right now is the Schoolyard UFO Encounters. And so maybe we could start there. Does that sound like a good jump off for you?
Yeah.
Okay. So what is a schoolyard encounter? Let's start with the basics. How's that?
Yeah. It's basically what it says. A schoolyard UFO encounter is an encounter that happens at school. But there's something really special about them. They're fundamentally different than your average sighting. If you in my own research, and I've found the same facts on the National UFO Reporting Center and other places, your average sighting is usually an anomalous light, usually at night. It's a brief sighting, maybe a few seconds, possibly a minute, and it just kind of darts by. Pretty high up there. Whereas these schoolyard UFO encounters, it's crazy because, first of all, these objects are specifically targeting schools. They're not coincidentally flying by and kids are seeing them, because they're coming from way high up, or the horizon, or just appearing, and they stop at the school or they circle around it, so they're clearly coming for the schools. There's like 5 major differences. Another major difference from your average sighting is almost all schoolyard sightings occur during the day, which may seem kind of obvious, but it's an important distinction, because this, with most sightings being at night of anomalous lights, most schoolyard sightings are daylight sightings of metallic discs. Very hard to misperceive something like that. Thirdly, most sightings are brief. Not with schoolyard sightings. 5 minutes would be very short for a schoolyard sighting. Usually 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half hour, an hour, 2 hours. Honestly, there's a few cases that are longer than that, over a period of days even. Another really interesting difference is these are very low level sightings. This is not like 3,000-4,000 feet even. That would be very high for a schoolyard sighting. The average is probably about 100 feet.
Holy crap.
Right? And, maybe 200, 400, but
Wow.
some much lower. We're talking, 50 feet, 20 feet. In fact, in 30% of the cases, there are actually landings and humanoids. Out of 100, 30% are landings. That's a very high percentage.
That's huge.
Right? So there's a few other differences. Your average sighting has maybe 2 witnesses, 4. Schoolyard sightings, your average sighting has maybe 40 witnesses, 50, 100, 200. Mostly kids, but I have to tell you, in about half the cases, teachers are seeing them too.
Mm.
And what's really interesting, oh my gosh, is that half of the schools that are having these things, Barbara, are elementary schools.
Yeah. Should we be afraid or not? This is our little children's beautiful little minds, right? That need to be protected.
Right. Yeah. Well, definitely it raised some real concerns for me. Thankfully, none of these cases seem to be violent or hostile or even negative. I have to tell you, there's a few where they did cause panic. They really did. But mostly, no, it's like they're just friendly, showing themselves off. In some cases, there's a government response. So our government is surely aware of this because it happens over and over again. The police show up or the Air Force comes and wants to investigate. There's often, a wave of publicity. So yeah, these are really unusual sightings that differ from your average encounter.
Yeah, but from what I've read from your research, they've just been here for how long?
Yeah, well, that's another interesting thing because I was looking into that. We know UFOs have been here forever, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, we've got hieroglyphics, we've got petroglyphs, we've got stone carvings from the Columbian era, we've got all kinds of stuff, Renaissance paintings, wood carvings from the Middle Ages. But we go up to the modern age of UFOs, which is 1947, and that's when things really changed for us. There's been waves of sightings, but not like that, and it's not stopped since that year. It's just escalated. And we're having all these abductions and all this stuff that's really largely historically unprecedented. And what we're seeing with the schoolyard encounters is they began pretty much precisely around 1950. But, well, I did find one early case, one case in 1855. But that's an outlier. Still fits the pattern of these cases where these, objects swoop down and show themselves off. But 1950 is when it really began. And Barbara, it's so interesting because there's this weird timing agenda, I guess, where it'll occur once or twice a year, or there'll be a major encounter, and then 2 weeks later, there's another.
Do they target certain schools repeatedly, or do they come back, or?
Not usually. Usually it's just a one-off, maybe over a period of days. I couldn't find any that were, hit one year and then several years had another. But there was a couple of schools in Bronx, New York. One high school had a major sighting, and then later that evening, another high school did in the Bronx, another public school. So there is a weird timing aspect.
It is. It's just. So, what are some of the patterns that you found? What would be a typical schoolyard encounter?
Well, there's probably 5 real famous ones, right? And the first one is a good example of a schoolyard encounter. Occurred at Hillsdale, Michigan in March 1966. This is a college, and it's a very well-known sighting. It's the first schoolyard sighting to really get any publicity. And what happened was, this is actually at night, which is very unusual for these cases, when some ladies in the women's dorm noticed this object hovering outside. And it wasn't going away. It was darting around. It came swooping up towards the windows, freaked them all out. Went back, circled around the airport tower there, and by this point, more people are coming. Soon there's a group of about 80 or 90 students and teachers, by the way, faculty, watching this thing, which they said was beautiful. It was large. It's actually landed in this kind of swamp in front of the school there for a short period of time and was viewed for about 2 hours. The police came, they were called, the police came, they saw it. One of the guys whips out his guns and he's going to shoot it. And the other officer says, no, don't do that. Probably not a good idea to shoot at a UFO.
Yeah.
But at any rate, these things finally moved off, caused a huge uproar. The Air Force, Project Blue Book, they sent out investigators. And J. Allen Hynek was, the astronomical consultant. He was usually the frontman. And he started investigating and really didn't have a chance to dig in when there was a press conference, and he kind of announced that maybe it was swamp gas. He wasn't saying it was, but he's offering this as a theory, which the press, the newspapers seized on, and all these articles came out. Air Force thinks it's swamp gas. Well, that was not a good idea because the students who saw this, the teachers and the police, knew it wasn't swamp gas. It had persisted far too long. It wasn't blinking on and off. It was there. It landed. So there was a huge uproar. It caused an immense amount of strife between the Air Force and the community, and really kind of it ended Project Blue Book. Long story short, because Ford was a representative at the time. He became president. It sparked the first congressional investigation into UFOs. It caused the Condon Committee to sort of take cases from Project Blue Book, and the Condon Committee found a negative conclusion on the existence of UFOs, and that caused Project Blue Book to be shut down. Like 2 years later, J. Allen Hynek, the pioneer of all this, said it was the low point of his entire career with the Air Force. And he knew at that point that Project Blue Book was a complete cover-up, really. Mm-hmm. It was not an actual investigative body. It was a publicity stunt more than anything. The really good cases never made it to Project Blue Book. They went to the Air Technical Intelligence Command. And Project Blue Book superiors were putting a lot of attention towards cases that had obvious prosaic explanations, like Venus. Whereas real cases, they didn't want to investigate. And if they had to, they would attack the witness. Mm-hmm. So Hynek was fed up. That was it. He quit. So yeah, that's our first schoolyard encounter.
Well, I never would have put that together at all. I had no idea. I'm sure our listeners are thinking the same thing. If you've been in this for a while, that's a huge correlation there.
Yeah, it's so interesting because right after that happened, there were some major researchers like Jamin Coral Lorenzen. Mm-hmm. Right after that case, they said, you know what? We've had an awful lot of cases over schools. I think we better look into this. And Ray Fowler was like, hey, me too. Of the 20 cases I had at that time, in that spring, 8 were over schools. John Keel said the same thing. So they called it. And you know what? 2 weeks later, in that weird timing thing that these UFOs do, the next ultimate schoolyard UFO encounter occurred in Melbourne, Australia at Westall High School. Oh my God, what a case.
Oh, let's hear that one. And so it is happening all over the world, not just specific places.
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that. Literally all over the world. I mean, we're talking South America, Mexico, Canada, England, France, Japan, Indonesia, Australia, of course, I just mentioned, all across Europe. Yeah, for sure. And this Westall High School case is such a good case. It's still causing waves today. It began on 2 weeks after the Hillsdale case, on April, I think it was like April 14th or so, 1966, or April 7th, around there, when suddenly one of the kids comes running in to one of the classrooms, Mr. Greenwood, I think it was. I get this mixed up with another really famous one because they're so similar. But someone came running into the class and said, there's UFOs outside. Everyone kind of laughed and started to run outside. The teacher's like, no, wait, the bell's about to ring. Hold on, we'll investigate it. We're a science class. And he couldn't stop them. All the kids started running out of the school. And it started with just, 50 or so witnesses, but grew up to about 300 students running like a herd of gazelle, is how the teachers described it, to the fence there. A bunch of kids hopped the fence. You're not supposed to, but what had happened is there was these three objects circling above the school. They were metallic, shiny metal, silent, and getting lower and lower. And darned if one of these things didn't land in the grove of trees right there next to the school. So interesting, because this is how it goes down in case after case. They land right next to the school in a grove of trees, just like that. And so a crowd of about 12 or 15 students run up to this thing and surround it. They're, feet away from this thing. It's sitting there on the ground. It's very small, like a little sports car or something, featureless, silent. It's radiating heat. It caused some burn marks on the grass, crushed the grass down, and stayed there for only a few moments. One girl, she fainted dead away, just boom. And this thing lifts up, turns sideways. This is another weird thing that they do. They'll turn, on end.
What?
Yes.
I've heard that before.
Weird, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't expect that.
Yeah, but it turns up. I'm like, hey, this happened in New Zealand too, and this happened here and there. And so it turns up on its side. Mind you, by this point, there's two other objects. There's 4 planes, little Cessna planes, circling the school and trying to chase these objects, which are darting around. They're blinking out. They're blinking back on. One teacher, she has a camera. She's photographing everything. So kids are screaming. They're just going nuts. This thing darts off, and all the others follow it. And so this took a few minutes, 15, 20 minutes for this to roll out. And by the time the students are trickling back into school, to the schoolyard itself, back to school, the police are there, the press is there, and guess who else? The Army. In full fatigues, they've got their Jeeps, and they're herding everyone inside. And what happened next is, not unprecedented. It's one of the first times I think this happened, but certainly not the only time. They started pulling students into offices and privately questioning them.
Oh.
I'm not sure how legal that is.
Doesn't sound legal. And what did you do at school today, Jimmy? Well, glad you asked.
Yeah, I was questioned by the Army, Mom. And they threatened them. They told them not to talk, flat out.
Oh.
And they brought all the kids into the school auditorium, and the headmaster was there. And he said, if you guys think you saw a UFO, you didn't. There's no such things. It wasn't a UFO, and didn't give any information really, but said you're not to talk about it. And anyone who will talk about it will get detention. Well, kids had already spoken to the media. They were already given interviews. The media was chased off, and some kids did get detention repeatedly. There was a few articles written about it, but it was effectively covered up. people were told not to talk about it, and they didn't. And, these were kids. The Army told the teachers not to talk about it, took the camera away from the teacher. And, now years later, researchers are trying to find evidence of this incident in military records and can't.
Can't, right? I was just going to say, I bet they can't find that.
But, there's
right?
Yeah, Shane Ryan, he put out a documentary on this. He's kind of grabbed the bull by the horns. The first guy to investigate it was James McDonald, really, an American researcher. He interviewed one of the teachers there, called up the airport. The airport denied it. They said, we didn't see anything and we don't know anything about those planes. I'm going to call that a lie. And the reason I say that is because this same exact thing happened in the Crestview case. Same thing happened in the Maranui, New Zealand case. This often happens, schools are located in usually, not rural areas. Mm-hmm. And often, several cases next to an airport, who should have seen what's going on. Maybe they didn't. I don't know. Because it's possible these objects are showing themselves off specifically to kids and only to kids, or only to the school. But man, oh man, what a case! There's been a lot written about it. No books have been put out on it yet. I'm hoping, but there is a monument, a little memorial set up right there on where it took place. So it will always be remembered. It's Australia's biggest encounter in their history.
So how's that in your face, right? That is, we have a monument, so that is an elephant in the living room. You can't walk around, right? It's even how hard they try. Because these children then grow to adults and they have to remember.
Yeah. Like Kecksburg, Pennsylvania has a monument for the UFO that crashed there. I know. Point Pleasant, West Virginia has a Mothman monument. So I love it when stuff gets memorialized like that, because there's so much covering up of UFO information.
Do you find that more in the United States compared to the rest of the world, or is that a loaded question?
I can't speak too authoritatively on the rest of the world, but yeah, it's definitely a worldwide cover-up for sure. We're no more forthcoming than, other countries are far more forthcoming. Mexico, Chile, Brazil, I think are really the ones on the forefront. We're there, France and England and Canada. But I don't know who's going to be the first to disclose. But this is kind of speaking to why these encounters are happening. Because we're not disclosing. This is kind of my theory, right?
Right.
That these schoolyard encounters are, in effect, an agenda to announce their presence on a grassroots level. And it's been effective because they're showing themselves really young kids.
Well, and I'm thinking that's a smart way to do it, right?
Yeah.
It's a brilliant way to do it, because it'll affect them the rest of their lives, and then it'll affect their children and their children.
Right, and it's not going to cause huge waves in society because these are kids. Mm-hmm. What kids don't, they're not believed often.
Right.
They don't have quite the clout as adults have, and yet they are very able to learn and absorb these things. What's so interesting is, in a good portion of these cases, these kids have never heard of a UFO. They don't even know. They're looking at this thing going, what? Oh my God, what is this? They don't know what UFOs are. Particularly back in the 1950s and 60s, But man, oh man, these early cases are crazy.
Well, you know what? When I remember one that just took my attention just out of the blue was the one in Africa, the Zimbabwe one, that you just can't deny that, right? It was
for sure
an extreme case in a way. I would think you're the expert on the.
Yeah, I thought it was, but no, it's not. there are many like it. In fact, after the book was published, Ray Hernandez, who you may know as the director of the Free Organization.
Yep, I know him well.
Great guy, very influential in the field. He's like, Preston, oh no, I've got another case for you.
Oh, shoot. You have to write another book, Preston.
That's what he's had. And he describes this case from Colombia, which is a spitting image of what happened at Rua, Zimbabwe at the Ariel Elementary School, which is such a good case. Can we talk about that one?
Yes, let's do it. It's the one that caught my attention and made me be aware of this phenomena to start with.
Yeah, me too. It's kind of one of the things that sort of piqued my interest, and I started looking at other cases, expecting to find a few. I'm like, this might make an interesting article. I found so many cases.
Oh, 100. That's without, 100 it's a substantial number.
Yeah, I got a cold chill until I realized it was actually very benevolent. And yeah, I'd love to talk about the Rua, Zimbabwe case, but not too much because it's been pretty well covered, and I know people know about it, and I want to cover some of our unknown cases, which is amazing. But
let's go to the unknown, wherever you want to take us. We're with you, Preston. Okay.
We have to cover the Rua, Zimbabwe case, Barbara.
Just briefly, then.
Yeah, because it's so amazing.
It is.
It's the ultimate case of this kind, for sure.
Okay.
And what happened was, this was 1994, November, and it's very strange because it just happened to be a supervisory meeting at the school. So only one adult was on the playground. Normally there'd be more. A weird coincidence. There's weird coincidences like this that happen. They'll show up when kids are on the playground, playing recess, or right when school lets out, or when teachers aren't available. And that happened here. There was 200 kids on the playground, at least. It's a very large playground. This is a pretty rural area. And suddenly, a bunch of kids noticed not one object, but multiple objects, metallic, with lights on them. Your typical object, some saw sort of orb-like lights, but others saw actual physical craft. And one of these craft lands right next to the school, out there in the field, a slight distance away. And boom, 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 3 beings come out. Now, at this point, there's a bit of a panic at the school. At least 60 kids saw this. Not everybody did. Some start running away to go get the teachers. Some start running towards the fence, which was really nothing more than a tree, cut down, a log. And one of these entities comes right up to the students. We're talking a couple of feet away, and starts communicating with them. It's amazing, right?
Yes.
And as always, usually what kids are, or all witnesses really, are stricken by in terms of the being is the eyes. The kids said they have very large eyes, dark eyes, scary eyes. They universally said it was wearing a dark jumpsuit. Some described black hair, like a hippie, is how one kid said, which is unusual. Possibly a stripe on the uniform. And some kids started getting messages. And there's just a handful, maybe 10, who reported communication. And it was all the same thing. The beings were warning these kids about environmental destruction. This is the number one message given to all people, anywhere who are taken on board a UFO, and it was true for them. One girl was told, "You're far too technological. There's a good way and a bad way to use technology, and you could be much better." One girl was told, "If you keep chopping down the forests, your planet will die." Another was told about pollution, so things like this.
Mm-hmm.
But such a great case. Oh, man. And yeah, there's another one in Colombia just like it. A number of really interesting entity cases.
Well, and to follow through when they're older, right? When they come back and revisit. afterwards where they're like it happened when they were young. They're adults now, and they still remember it vividly.
Universally, but you hear many of these kids, and by the way, none has ever walked back their story. None has ever been implicated in any kind of hoax or even the intimation of one. In fact, sometimes they have reunions because this, and they all say, "Oh my gosh, this affected me for the rest of my life." Some were profoundly affected. Some became contactees. Some became UFO researchers. It affected them that deeply. Some became teachers about science and quantum physics, and so it really affects them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, there's so many amazing cases. One that people, I'm sure, haven't heard because I was able to interview the witnesses firsthand, and it's never been published. Most of these are from, the National UFO Reporting Center or various researchers. Most major researchers have uncovered cases like these, but from MUFON, NICAP, APRO, and other UFO reporting centers, books. I subscribed to the UFO news clipping service for years and years and years before the internet, so a bunch came from there. So I think most people don't know about the majority of these cases, really.
Mm-hmm.
But I know no one knows about this one in Mentor, Ohio, which occurred in 1964. I met this lady at Contact in the Desert last year, I think it was. And last year, she was 11 years old. She's out there on the playground, and 3 or 4 of her friends start screaming, "Oh my God, look, look, look." And she looks up, and sure enough, there is this metallic object. It's your classic flying saucer. It's pretty much featureless, but it's getting lower and lower and lower, and then it's right over the trees there next to the school, kind of like not quite all the way across the street, but like a little field there, right? Mm. So very close. And she gets a message. She said something very strange happened. And this turned up in the Rua, Zimbabwe case, turned up in a number of cases. She said there was a sense of timelessness. I asked her, like, how long was it there? She says, I couldn't tell you. I got this weird feeling of it was just me and the UFO, and time seemed to stop almost. And she felt this real strong connection and got a mental message. And it said very clearly twice, "Remember this day."
Huh.
So, right? Weird.
Yeah.
Clear enough that she felt like this was not like her own self saying this. Mm-hmm. This was a message she received. And this thing lands, apparently, in the trees there. And she's staring because you can't really see it now. When zoom, it darts out like a silver bullet, she said, just a streak. You'd have to have been looking at it. And she looks around, doesn't really appear that anyone else is seeing this, which is pretty unusual. Usually it's the whole playground, but not always. Sometimes it's just one kid. Yeah, I have a case where it's one kid saw this thing, screams, turns around and screams and points, and it's gone. I felt bad for him.
Oh.
But yeah,
this stab numbers with you, right?
Right. So this lady, saw this, and it affected her deeply, and she's had contact since then. But following this event, nobody talked about it. It was sort of taboo, kind of, or just didn't come up. Very strange, but not unusual.
Yeah, that's weird after you have something that extraordinary, and then it's like, how's the weather?
Yeah, we see that in normal UFO cases.
Yes, yeah.
So here's another great case.
Okay.
Oh my God. This occurred in March 1966, probably around the same time as the Hillsdale. Mm-hmm. Same month. This is at Point Elementary School in St. Louis, Missouri. The main witness is Melody corn. I interviewed her firsthand. The other witnesses, I'm still trying to track them. She knows them. They're friends. It's her and 5 others. She still knows 4 of them or 3 of them. So what happened is it's they're out at recess and everyone's playing Foursquare and they're like, let's do something different. So they decide they're going to play tag. And they go off to the football diamond out there, sort of at the end of the field there. And as they get there, they're just about to start playing when someone points to the ground and says, "What's that?" And there's these weird footprints. And they're looking at them, and they're bipedal. They can see this. These are, elementary age kids, but they're, old enough to see this. They're like age 11, I believe it was. And trying to figure out what it could be because they're just too small. They're really tiny footprints. And they're like kind of following them around when someone sees a flash of light in the trees next to the school. There's nothing there. It's just trees, a little hill. There's a farm right next to the school. There's a little farm they can see. There's 4 cows on this farm, which is an important factor. And so they're looking at this bright white light through the trees and they think, ice cream truck.
I love that.
So cute. And so they're like, not supposed to, but they couldn't resist. They jumped the fence. It was easy to do. It's just a little thing they can crawl through.
Back then it was, not like now, right?
Yeah, it wasn't a chain link they had to climb or anything like that.
Yeah.
So they run into the trees and they're like, whoa, this is not an ice cream truck. It's a UFO. It's landed. It's like a haystack, kind of. It's pretty large, but not super huge. A small room. It's silver. It's got lights on it, a bright light on top, portholes, maybe landing legs. Melody's not quite sure because her attention was immediately drawn, her attention and the other kids, to a humanoid that was standing much closer, actually, like 20 feet away from them. This object was landed about 50 feet away. And this humanoid has got its eyes locked on them. They're staring at him and he's staring at them. And they're all in a row, standing pretty close together, staring at this thing. And they said she was really interested if I'd ever heard of being described like this. And I had to tell her, not exactly. You get a lot of unusual humanoid reports that are fairly unique. This wasn't your typical gray. It did have a large bald head, large dark eyes, but its skin was kind of tan and actually dark. She said it was kind of a dark-skinned and had a very muscular body, reminding her of a gymnast. Probably was wearing some sort of suit, but she can't be sure about that, some sort of jumpsuit, but was very muscular and had a kind of a face like a gorilla, kind of.
Sasquatch, hybrid. My mind goes everywhere with that.
I never thought of that. It was short, very short. I guess that's why.
Wow.
Bigfoot, but hey.
They do. Encounters like that. That's your next book, Preston.
All right.
Sasquatch and UFO Encounters.
Yeah, I've gotten some cases. So yeah, this was really strange, and they're kind of freaking out. And this being starts backing up, walking slowly towards its craft, while still, and then it kind of turns around. It's still keeping its eyes locked on them, but walking towards its craft, and goes up to this fence where there's a cow. It reaches, this is so weird, it reaches out and touches the cow. That cow falls over, boom, unconscious.
What?
Dead, they don't know.
Oh.
And so this being is walking, around that, it's going towards its craft, but around that exact second, there's a loud scream behind them. It's Mrs. Ollendorf, the teacher.
Oh.
She's not happy. She's hysterical. She sees the being. She sees the craft. She sees it all. We don't have a statement from her, but Melody's like, oh yeah, she saw it. And she's like, get away now. She grabs them and pulls them and away, and back to the school. By this point, everyone in the playground is rushing towards the fence, and she pulls them all back into the school and into her classroom, and all the kids run up to the window and can still see the UFO through the trees. They can't see the humanoid, but you can see this object blinking, and they're freaking out, and all the kids are talking, and Mrs. Ollendorf's running up and closing the blinds as fast as she can and ordering people back to their desks. They're not paying attention. She runs out and gets the other teachers and the principal and to, calm the class down.
Right.
And school's cut short that day. They pulled them all into the gymnasium. This is pretty much what happened at Westall. This happens at Crestview in Opelika, Florida, which we haven't talked about. But they pulled them all into the gymnasium, which had no ground level windows. It had some very high placed windows along towards the top of the walls. And suddenly one of the students shouts out, "There it goes!" He saw this object taking off, he says. And everyone's piled into their buses and taken home. The next day, teachers completely deny it. No, nothing happened. Don't talk about it. We won't talk about it. Nothing happened. Kids talked about it for weeks. It was the buzz of the school. They still talk about it.
I would think so. Like anytime you have there has to be a bonding that happens, right? That usually that it helps to be able to talk about it, right? Tell that story each time. It makes it more real. Where if you're told that it didn't happen, and you talk with your friends that say, yeah, it did happen, then usually the truth prevails in this, doesn't it?
Yeah. I like to think that the truth kind of take care of itself, and I think it can. But such a great case, man. And there's so many.
We're getting ready to take a little break in just 5 minutes, and so when we come back, I'd love for you to talk about your favorite case, or if you have a favorite case, or your weirdest case, and then where is this all going? What can we do with this? What can we take away from all of these experiences? And if people do want to get a hold of you, and they can contact you at your website. It's at PRESTONDENNETT.weebly.com.
That's right.
That's PRES as in Sam, TONDENNETT.WEEBLY.com. I just want to make sure they're able to connect with you, and they can pick up your book at Amazon, Schoolyard UFO Encounters, along with your 25 other books, Preston. I just love it. I love it. And I love the cover on your book too. It's it's very inviting. It's inviting, and I don't know who does your covers, but they did a great job too.
Oh, my sister-in-law, actually.
Really, she does a great, because it feels childlike. Isn't that interesting? The first time I looked at the image, I thought, oh, they're talking with all these kids, but they seem to be doing it with respect, right? I don't see the children in too much fear. Do you find we have just a few minutes? What's the fear factor as a general rule upon first having an experience like this in the schoolyard?
There is some fear. I mean, that happened in the Rua Zimbabwe case. Some kids ran away. They were frightened. They tried to get the teachers. The teachers were like, "Don't bother me." So no teachers saw it in that. But yeah, one of the first cases occurred in Prestonsburg, Kentucky in 1950. And there were some 40 students when there's two UFOs and a teacher. Two UFOs came swooping down and scared the daylights out of them. poor things. It was a really loud object. They're clearly trying to get people's attentions. And it came back again. It's even lower. So some of these kids fainted. They thought it was the end of the world. They threw up. It was tough. But that's not usually what happens. Usually kids are like, wow, look. Kids don't have prejudices. They don't care what color your skin is. They don't care if you have big eyes and no hair and came out of a UFO. They are very open-minded. It makes them excellent witnesses, in my, opinion.
Yeah. And so my next question before we go, were any of them actually taken aboard the ship?
Yes, that does happen.
Really?
Yeah, mostly in high schools. I found a few in elementary school. I found another case that's not in the book where a guy said, oh, yeah, they took our whole class.
What? Oh,
yeah.
We have to talk about that, too.
I wish I had more information on it, but I haven't been able to find the guy.
Wow, that's just wild. Are there a certain type that belongs to these ships? Is it Arcturian, or is it Pleiadian, or is it just a combination, or is there any idea where they
all different?
We'll get back to that question after the break, okay? Tune in, everyone. Thanks. Be back right after this break. Stay right where you are. Thanks, Preston. Be right back.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Wadiya will remain a dictatorship. Oh, be quiet. Why are you guys so anti-dictators? Imagine if America was a dictatorship. You could let 1% of the people have all the nation's wealth. You could help your rich friends get richer by cutting their taxes and bailing them out when they gamble and lose. You could ignore the needs of the poor for healthcare and education. Your media would appear free, but would secretly be controlled by one person and his family. You could wiretap phones. You could torture foreign prisoners. You could have rigged elections. You could lie about why you go to war. You could fill your prisons with one particular racial group, and no one would complain. You could use the media to scare the people into supporting policies that are against their interests.
Tune in Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, for Liberation Nation with Deacon John, where America comes to hear the truth.
I know this is hard for you Americans to imagine, but please try.
Ohio Exopolitics will be on from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern on Studio A. Mark Schneider will have guests on that will discuss many important topics, including the state of the world today. However, much of the show will be dedicated to the writings of Edward Albert Meyer. Let me read a short passage from one of his writings. Love is the highest principle of creation, and through it, everything exists in absolute logic. All of nature in its indescribable splendor is nothing but the love of creation, which is expressed visibly. The love of creation is everywhere, because without it, nothing at all would be able to exist. Please join Mark on Ohio Exopolitics from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern on Studio A.
It is no secret that the so-called mainstream media is best described as controlled propaganda. Countless news stories are either totally ignored or spun with half-truths, and because of this, essential facts and vital information are often compromised. Join Dr. Ott every Friday night on Studio B at 10 p.m. Eastern and learn why The Story Behind the Story was nominated for a Peabody Award in its second year of producing unparalleled broadcasting excellence in 1997. That is, if you really care about learning the truth.
Transcending time and space, let us take you to the place inside your mind where thoughts divide and mysteries unwind. Join us every Monday evening right here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And you will catch the Fenton Perspective with our great host, Lorian Fenton. Come listen in as she shares her amazing stories from the past to present, along with all of her guest secrets to the future. That's the Fenton Perspective every Monday evening right here from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, only on Revolution Radio. Oh, and you don't need to expect us. We're already here.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
This is your host, Barbara Jean Lindsey, and welcome back to the Cosmic Oracle Show, Part 2 with Preston Dennett. We're talking all about UFOs targeting schools worldwide. What's up with that, right? What's our government doing with that? What's our teachers doing with that? How does it affect the children? How does it affect our world? And we'll have Preston on back for Part 2. But before we do, I want to thank you for giving generously to Revolution Radio and keeping us on the air all these years. This is my 5th year doing this, the Cosmic Oracle Show, and all you have to do is go to freedomslips.com. That's freedomslips.com, and give $5, $10, whatever you can to keep us on the air. We really appreciate it and want to thank you in advance for your generosity. So we're welcome back to the show, Preston Dennett.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. You're welcome. This is just, I've been having a really good time. I don't know about you, and I'm sure our listeners are, because there's so much to cover here. It's like you're in a candy store and you're just going to pick one out for us and tell us one amazing story after another.
Yeah, I know. I hope I'm not talking too fast, because I get really excited and I want to get this stuff out because these cases are so amazing.
No, I love it. I'm sure they can feel your passion for your work. You can feel it. That's good. That's good. So let's start with another one, shall we?
Yeah.
You talked about something about a Florida one.
Right, the Opelika, Florida.
Yeah.
Crestview Elementary School. This is a classic case. This is one of the 5 or 6 cases that really kind of busted out almost into mainstream. This one was pretty effectively covered up, actually. Here's this weird timing thing again. It occurred on the anniversary of the Westall case, 1 year later to the day.
What?
Right?
Synchronicity, right?
And it's pretty much identical to the Westall case, so identical that, honest to God, I've had difficulty separating them. The real difference is the Westall case was high school, and the Crestview is elementary. Otherwise, it's virtually identical. Some 200 kids. Well, actually, it began with a small group, about 6 kids and a teacher, the day before. who saw this silver object hovering over the school. And the student's like, what's that? What's that, Mr. Fell? He's the science teacher. And he's like, I don't know. That's weird. And it darts away. And he described it, like two convex lenses stuck together, your typical flying saucer. So the next day, someone comes running into the class and says, there's UFOs outside. And everyone goes running out, some 200 kids. And sure enough, one of these things, there's multiple objects. One of them lands in the field right next to the school. And this case has got some very interesting elements to it because the government apparently showed up while these objects were still there, pulled these kids into the classroom, and shut down the school. All the kids who were walked to school or took a bike were allowed to leave immediately. And a number of them had said, yeah, when I left, those objects were still there. And they were being guarded by the military. And other kids were just bussed home. And teachers were like, hey, what are you doing? I mean, not teachers, their parents. Like, what are you doing home so early? So some of the teachers called. This happens, pretty regularly in these cases. And calling this teachers the next day or that day, trying to figure out what happened. And the teachers are like, well, I can't really say, but if someone told you that something landed next to the school, it might not be far off from the truth. So, sort of waffling around it a little bit. So they were told not to talk about it. In this case, there wasn't so much a cover-up, but they said what you saw was helicopters. You saw helicopters at the local airport there, which was nearby, by the way. But no, it wasn't anything like a helicopter. It was totally silent. This did have one or two articles written about it, like Westall, but was effectively covered up for years and years.
It's pretty amazing. The thing that's, I think, the most shocking for me is the humanoids being a part of it. I find that surprising. I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, me either. There were no humanoids in the Westall case, except to one witness who said, yeah, there was. One witness said he saw some. There are no humans, as far as I know, in the Opalaka case. But, it's a definite possibility. Because, like I say, they're not only landing, there's humanoid. Here's a good humanoid case.
Okay.
This is probably, one of my favorite. I don't want to call it my favorite because there's so many good ones. But I really liked this one because this one was not published. I found the eyewitness testimony, audio of it, and I had to transcribe it myself because I couldn't find it anywhere else. This occurred on May 6, 1977, at Ocean Knoll Elementary School in Encinitas, California.
Oh.
And how it came to light was one gentleman's 10-year-old daughter comes home and says, Daddy, I saw a UFO at school. And he's like, what? And she's like, yeah, it was like two plates stuck together. It was really low. The girl had binoculars. She saw it. Everyone saw it. The teacher saw it. It came early in the morning. They saw it first early in the morning, and this thing had a big picture window in front of it. It came, hovered over the school, circled around it 3 times, and then lands in the canyon next to the school. It's a pretty steep canyon. Mm-hmm. So you can't really see where it landed, but they could see through this window, and there were humanoids in there. And the father's like, well, what did they look like? And she says, they didn't look normal. I thought maybe they were wearing masks. So what happened was an hour passed, and they're out at recess, and this thing rises up, and it starts hovering over the school again. And it's closer this time. It's 100 feet away, 50. They can see it, at eye level, and then it rises up about 100 feet over the school. And again, they can see through this window. There's 3 or 4 humanoids, and it circles around for a few minutes, not super long, enough to freak the kids out and the teacher, at least one teacher, and darts off. And so the father hears all this. He's like, oh my God. And so he goes to the school the next day and he's like, what happened? and the teacher denies it and will not talk about it. She will not talk about it. And the teacher was telling all the students not to talk about it either. So some students wouldn't talk, but he finally, knew some students and found them, tracked them down with their parents and interviewed them. And they're like, yeah, they had weird lumpy faces. They weren't human. I don't know what it was. It was quiet. It was a metallic craft. So a bunch of kids saw it. And this poor father could not get any help. Couldn't get any help from the school. Barely was able to verify the incident with other students, but did. So he calls the police. The police have no interest at all. And he calls the news, and the news has no interest. They don't at all. And he didn't know who to call. He didn't know about UFO organizations. He finally did find one and submitted an interview. So most of these, I'm guessing, are going unheard, covered up or just not even recorded.
Wow, I'm so glad that you have them all in one place so that it's undeniable. How's that? Not one story or 10 stories or 20, but I have 100 stories.
Yeah, I dare you to try and deny it, because I'll hit you with another one. And if you don't believe that one, I've got another one after that.
Yeah. And so what do, as a general rule, are all are there very different shapes of crafts that the kids see, or are they all pretty much standard, or all variety?
You get, which is pretty unusual, usually metallic craft. Not often are there portholes, but usually described as saucers, football shaped, round. There's a few spherical object cases. One's shaped like a sombrero. What a great case. 1952.
Oh, let's hear that. I can't stand that one. Let's hear that one.
Yeah, it's such a good case. It's one of the early ones on record. This was at Elder Park Elementary School. 1954, I believe it was. 52, summer of 1952, Glasgow, Scotland.
Scotland.
Beautiful. And I actually looked this school up because they were describing this steeple that this object hovered over. And I'm like, yep, there's the school and there's the steeple. So it was summer of 1952, school's just let out. And everyone's walking on the yard in front of the school, including, the teacher is right behind one of the main witnesses. Joan is her name, the custodian, and a bunch of students, when suddenly this perfectly round shadow starts playing across the field. It's a giant shadow. And so everyone, of course, looks up, and there's this huge object, like 100 feet across. And it's moving very slowly. It's totally silent. And it goes and it stops over the school. And it's turning around and rotating slightly, hovering, rocking a little bit. It's shaped like a sombrero hat. And is just sitting there for 5 minutes. The main witness is like, there was a weird sense of timelessness, which I've described in other cases. Just not quite sure how long it was there. But suddenly this thing starts tilting. It lets out a loud whining noise and darts off over Glasgow, Scotland. And everyone's like, oh my God. And all the kids go running home to tell their parents. Many who did not believe them until the next day when it made the papers, because there were adults who saw this. So it's a great case, and it's typical of what they're doing. Coming down very low level, stopping over the school, staying there, showing themselves off, and then going away.
Yeah, just is that, why do you think they do that? What do you think? That's a lot of trouble to take, right? To make yourself be known to the children all over the world. What do you think is their agenda?
Yeah, it's unusual, isn't it? Yeah. If you look at groups of people who are outside, you don't have a lot of group sightings. You know what I mean? Where large groups of people. There's a few. There's a few concert sightings, music things. Not a lot. Nothing like this. But I have to tell you, I'll give you a sneak preview of my next book.
Okay.
I did find another thing very much like this, and it's drive-in movie theaters.
What? Drive-in movie theaters?
So we can touch on that if you want. But
yeah,
what I think is happening with these schoolyards is the same thing that's happening with this, is they're showing themselves off on purpose. I'm speculating here, but this is a very kind of overt, brazen behavior, which is at odds with how they usually behave. These things aren't, usually in a place where they're easily photographed or easily seen for a long period of time. These kids, generally speaking, don't have photographs. But I have to tell you, there are a few. Some kids did manage to capture photos, for sure. So I think what we're dealing with here is some ETs who are, like I mentioned this earlier, conducting a publicity campaign, a grassroots campaign going directly to the people, because they did go to our governments first. They did.
Mm-hmm.
The 1954 Eisenhower meeting.
Right.
And meetings at Holloman Air Force Base and others that have been leaked to the press that we know of. I'm sure there were more that we don't. And when according to the Eisenhower meeting, they wanted to disclose and we didn't. So they're going to do it on their own agenda. And they're going to do it because I think what they're doing is they're pushing towards open official contact, but they don't want to, sort of disrupt society to the degree that it really hurts people. So they're going to people, youngsters, in fairly large numbers, fairly regularly, all over the world, at least once or twice a year. I'm guessing it's probably quite a bit more because most cases aren't reported, and showing themselves. And it's a very simple thing. And it's worked because now we have a universal belief in UFOs, pretty much, among our younger generation at least. Majority of people believe in UFOs.
Yes. That's shifted, for sure.
It's if that's their agenda. Some people have asked, how are any of these kids being abducted? You asked about that.
I did.
And there are a few cases. I mean, there's one case where it's usually high school, interestingly enough. One kid was at a high school in, where was this? Georgia. Yeah, Atlanta, Georgia, and saw this UFO. And he had a horrible feeling it was after him. You could see this from the playground. And he told his parents, they didn't believe him. And he ended up calling Leonard Stringfield, a very famous UFO researcher, and told him what happened. Well, the next day, he disappears. The kid's gone. And the parents are freaking out. They call the police, file a missing persons report. Leonard Stringfield gets involved because they find out that, the student had made a call to him. And they can't find this poor kid. Finally, they find him at Atlanta Airport. And the kid is in tears. He's like, they're going to take me. They're going to abduct me. And Leonard Stringfield gets the whole story out of him. They take the kid back to home, and it turns out the kid had taken money out of the bank account and was running away from home because he was afraid he was going to get abducted. Because after, he had been followed home by a UFO on a later occasion, and the next day at night he had a visitation in his bedroom where he was apparently abducted. Had missing time, saw a large-eyed creature who said, don't be afraid, come with us. He doesn't remember much more than that. So this does happen. There's a case in Missouri where 50 girls were having a slumber party in the gymnasium at school when Grays walked in, stopped time. This happened in another high school, by the way, and another one where they stopped time. And they took 4 girls out and subjected them to fairly typical examinations, which these were Grays. Put them back into the school, in their positions where they were originally at and restarted time. I don't know how else to describe it. This is what the witness says.
It's just wild. That is wild. But
Yeah.
it makes sense. It makes sense.
So yeah, I think it's an agenda to sort of further their plan to have open official contact in a way that's non-disruptive.
And figuring out, I wonder if they have it already figured out exactly how they're going to do it, when they're going to do it, and all of that, or are they kind of rolling with it too a little bit?
I don't know. It's hard to say. There's still modern cases, of UFOs hovering over schools. It's been going on for 70 years now. It certainly was a little bit more active back in the day, I'd say. That's a fair statement. But it could be that it takes a while for current cases to trickle down and get recorded. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. But speaking towards, these objects want to be known, and does our government know about this? Well, I'll tell you yes to both, because on October 22nd, 1954, this incredible event happened at Jerome Elementary School in Marysville, Ohio.
All right, let's hear it.
You're going to love this one.
Okay. I'm excited. This is awesome.
60 students are on the playground. A lot,
Yeah.
And it's an extra recess because they were such good kids. It's an elementary school, and they were, well behaved that day, and it was a beautiful day, the teacher said. Clear as a bell, blue sky, when suddenly these objects show up pretty low, maybe 500,000 feet, very bright lights or windows perhaps. And the kids are looking at these things and wondering, because they're circling around over the school over and over and over. About 5 minutes pass, maybe a little longer, when someone gets the bright idea to alert the objects, alert the teachers. So when someone goes running inside and pulls out the principal and says, there is something hovering over the school. And he looks at this thing, and he said, Mr. Dimmick, I think was his name, said, I have never seen anything like this. I have never seen anything like this before or since. It was extremely bright, too bright to look at, very low, and hovering in place. And he did what everyone should do when they see a UFO, is get another witness.
Sure.
So he calls another teacher, and she comes running out and doesn't see it, because as soon as she pops out of the building, this thing darts away. But something really amazing happened now. Suddenly, the entire sky over the school filled with this beautiful, downy, kind of snowflakey, spiderwebby substance, which we now know as angel hair. This is, it's like cotton candy, kind of.
Right.
And it was thick. It came down over this school, inches thick, covering the playground, covering the school, and covering the area around the school for several acres, miles. The school was clearly targeted. Angel hair is pretty rare. There's some theories it's like exhaust or something. Nope, I disagree. I think I know what it is.
Oh, let's hear.
They've analyzed this stuff. It's got weird substances, boron, some other, weird kind of elements to it that are not particularly unusual or particularly common, rather. But nobody knows what it is. And they're like, I don't know. It's a product of the engines. But if that's true, how come we have a gazillion sightings and only a few angel hair cases?
Rare.
It's very rare. We've got a couple hundred cases. And we've got hundreds of thousands of UFO sighting cases. Super rare, proportionally speaking. So my theory is that this is purposeful. It's an intentional ejection of material given as a gift. Really nothing more than that. To a really kind of a look at me moment. Saying you can't ignore this. And they couldn't.
It's
so
the substance.
Right? Kids are scooping it up. They bring it to the teacher. The teacher rolls it up in his hands into this globby ball. Turns his hands green. Both teachers.
It turns his hand green? What?
Yeah, both teachers are dealing with this. So one teacher, she's not liking that, so she goes and washes her hands, and Mr. Dimick, he leaves it on to see what happens. And he said it just kind of sublimated, it evaporated away, which is what the substance generally does almost immediately. But this was so voluminous, so much of it, that they were able to save a portion of it, which they sent to the local newspaper and sent to Lockbourne Air Force Base, who never said a word about it.
We didn't get no testing done on it to find out anything, or
they were supposed to. I'm sure they did, but they're not going to tell us because what happened is, the press showed up and they, of course, wrote a few articles about it. And then here comes the Air Force. They're coming in. It's Robert White from the Air Force saucer study that they were conducting secretly. And he didn't, provide any information for years and years and years until, some researchers sought him out. And he's like, oh, yeah, I remember that case, the Jerome Elementary's case. That was the one case we could never make sense of. Mm-hmm. So let me put a postscript on this one, if I may.
Yes, you have us on the edge of our seats.
Because it's precisely 3 years later, there's that weird timing aspect. Whitsett, North Carolina, there's 120 students on the playground, and a couple of teachers and the principal, when these metallic objects show up, 5 of them, they're kind of spherical, and eject angel hair, and a huge amount of it. These are the 2 largest angel hair drops that I know of in the U.S. There's another one over France, which was over a school, by the way.
Of course.
Yeah, it's right over a school. It was thick, so thick. The objects dart away, and the kids are freaking out. They're scooping it up. One kid's about to put it in his mouth. The principal runs up to him like, no, the kid eats it.
He does.
I'm does. Just
gonna ask, what are the side effects of this?
He spit it out. He says, ew, it tasted bad, salty, he said.
Oh, interesting.
Because it looked like cotton candy. You can't blame them.
Yeah.
And kids, so cute.
Do they have any euphoria with it or bliss, or is it so that it felt more like a gift?
It was just fun, a fun event, kind of.
I love it.
So
and
in my mind
too, right? It's creative.
Yeah. So this is what I think is happening, And if people want to know what angel hair is, that's my theory based on these types of events. Oh. So they gathered some up. This guy, the principal, is an Air Force captain, turns out. He's flown 40 combat missions. And Principal Lambeth, he knows his stuff. He scoops them up, gets a big sample of it, and sends it off to Burlington Science Labs. And that Burlington Lab says, well, we don't know what this is. We cannot identify it. We think it's biological, maybe spider webs. We suggest you contact a biologist because they couldn't figure it out. Science labs. So he sends it to, this is very unusual. This stuff usually evaporates immediately. This is one of very few cases that people have been able to gather samples. So he sent.
Change anything, like if it in the field of it, like a crop circle. When a crop circle happens, it changes the where it hit, where it was.
What a good idea! Yeah. I don't think there's ever been a study of that. Probably because there's so few of these cases and it evaporates so quickly. That was one of the theories, that it's some sort of device to control atmosphere or do something to our atmosphere.
Well, and we need all the help we can get, right?
Right. So who knows?
Yeah.
But so he sent it to the biologist, and the biologist says, well, I can tell you this isn't spider webs, and I have no idea what it is, but definitely not spider webs. It's far too regular. These are not spider webs. If this is all over the playground, you would have spiders in there. Mm-hmm. And there was no evidence of that. So in comes the Air Force. They send someone in, and they're not happy. They're like, you didn't see anything. And he says, yes, I did. I flew 40 combat missions. How many have you flown?
Ooh, good one.
So he wasn't having it and really confronted the Air Force on this and wasn't happy. This is not unusual. There was a case in Moline, Illinois, where an officer was able to get moving film of this object, which was seen by 40 students and 2 nuns, and he's a police officer. Great case. I've actually seen this footage. It's by today's standards not great, but it does show a lighted object in the sky moving off. And the Air Force was very interested, and they really wanted to interview him, and so did the police. And he was later interviewed by someone from some intelligence agency who refused to say where they were from. You know, the Men in Black type.
Mm-hmm.
So our government knows our schools are being targeted for sure.
Yeah, but it's what I'm getting. It's a little bit out of control, though, right? And there's no control over it. They get to land and come whenever and however they choose at this point.
Yeah, I think so. But you know, they're on a mission. Like May 17th, 1970, Richmond School in Maranui, New Zealand. 400 students are on the playground. 400.
Oh, I love this.
This is one of the most widely viewed ones, but there's a couple of others. And so this is, you know, I believe it's an elementary school. There's an airport nearby, by the way, who denied seeing, of course, anything. But what happened was suddenly, you know, there's a couple teachers on the playground, and they notice all the kids are deathly quiet. Normally they scream and they're laughing. You know how loud kids are.
They're loud,
recess. It's very loud. Suddenly it's deathly silent. And he's looking around at the kids, and they're all staring up at the sky. Some are pointing, and he looks up, cannot believe his eyes. Other teachers described the same thing. It was a huge black circle approaching the school. It looked almost like a black hole, he said, until it got close, and he could see that it did have a surface that was glistening and looked metallic, but very strange and shimmery and kind of weird and huge. So huge it covered a third of the sky, maybe. I mean, it was massive, huge. And it's right over the school and stays there, Barbara, for like 10 minutes, 5-10 minutes. And everyone's like stock still. They're glued. They're looking at it. No one else saw this, just the school, as far as we know. This thing goes off to the side a little bit, turns up on its side, like I told you they do, and darts off into the sky really fast. 400 kids saw this, 2 teachers. No one can explain it.
That is just incredible. It's incredible. It's incredible, but if it's happening all over the world, there's a connection to all of it.
Yeah, it's so cool because like all different kinds of schools. Once there was the North Carolina School for the Deaf, for people who cannot hear, had an amazing encounter. That they were coming down over the school. They see this object. It's so low, Barbara, that they think it's going to hit the school. They actually think it's going to hit the actual building. It rises up and goes over it, but it's pulsing this deep, deep thrumming that is so kind of loud that the deaf children can hear it. They can feel it. So they all come running outside and can see it. Now, how considerate is that for these UFOs to, show themselves to people who are, challenged in some way?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's just really interesting.
It is.
And there's like another case, October 1970, 50 students at the Foxcroft boarding school in Middleburg, Virginia. It's a high-class boarding school. They're out there on the yard studying. It's daytime when this UFO shows up. Classic flying saucer. And what does it do? It's very low, by the way. It shines down a beam of light. that's that kind of look at me
Oh.
behavior. And all the girls jump up and they start running towards it. And we're like, it's a UFO, it's a flying saucer. Wait for us. Take us with you. And they followed it as it lazily kind of moved off into the distance and took off.
That is just, it's got to change you, I know. And it's a way of teaching. And in a way, if you've given an experience, you can't talk your way out of it. You can't walk around it, right? Experience. I was talking about that with friends earlier today, that the teaching by experience is, it just cuts through so much. It goes right to the core very quickly.
Yeah, it really has a profound effect on all the witnesses. A good example was what happened to Malcolm Robinson in Scotland, Banchory, Scotland. Mm-hmm. He's with his friends. This is elementary school. I think it's elementary. I'd have to look that one up, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah, Banchory, that's right, Banchory Primary School. He and his friends see this object. It's about 500, 600 feet high. It's a white egg-shaped object. It's hovering there. His friends are like, maybe it's a balloon, but Malcolm can see it's not. I mean, it's stock still in the sky. It's not moving. It's not a balloon. It's not the right shape. It's this white egg-shaped object. And they're staring at it and staring at it. It's there for like 10 minutes when suddenly it's not there. It just darts off. So he is profoundly affected by it and ends up becoming Scotland's leading UFO investigator, or certainly one of them. Yeah. He wrote UFOs over Scotland 1 and 2. I see him on TV. I've seen him. So this is how it's affecting people in a very profound way.
Were there specific types? Were there all kinds of general, the gamut of types of ETs that come out of the craft, if they do come out of the craft, or do you find a correlation?
There were some grays. Mostly it's unusual humanoids, short humanoids. There was one with, I believe it was 10-foot tall, green-skinned type of humanoid. In some cases they don't really remember. There was one interesting case. Gosh, I can't remember the name of the school, but I'll just tell what I do remember because it was so interesting. Is this kid, he loves school, and he's always first in line when the bell rings because he wants to be back in class. And recess was about to end when someone pointed out this rainbow-colored object in the sky. This is in the U.S., and he's looking at it, and he's like, wow, that's weird. And suddenly, there's a shift in time. The bell has rung, and he's confused because he's still out on the playground. And he would have heard the bell. So he goes running in, and everyone's looking at him like, where were you? He's like, I don't know. He didn't know what to think of it. And had some confusion with time. That's a red flag. Mm-hmm. And, it's another red flag. It's what he remembered in his dream state. He had a powerful dream that he was taken on board this object and didn't see the humanoids other than that they were very short, and other students had been taken on board, and they were all being told to do these kind of telekinetic tests, sort of, weird tests. This turns up in a few cases, by the way. And one of the tests was to sort of divert objects from hitting them using their mind, and another was to turn a box inside out using their mind.
Huh. So they're being taught some real school, right?
Yep. Apparently, in some cases, it's weird. In one case, one of the reasons I actually wrote this book is because I was kind of ruminating on these schoolyard cases. I'm like, wonder if this is a thing, because I had a couple of my own cases, and I knew about Opalaka and Rua Zimbabwe. No, I didn't know about the Opalaka. I knew about the Rua Zimbabwe case and a few others. But I read this case, which I have since been unable to locate, darn it, where these grays walked into the classroom, time stopped, and they're walking up and down the rows of the class. And only one student can apparently see them or is aware. He's the main witness. And he can't move. He's paralyzed. He can see what's happening. And next thing he knows, they're walking out and time has started up again, and the teacher continues with the lesson as if nothing has happened. So weird.
Huh. That is weird. What is the weirdest story you have?
There are several weird ones. Here's a very weird one. 1964, this is just a few days after the Lani Zamora case, which is a very famous landing in Socorro, New Mexico. This is in Albuquerque, not far away, by the way, and a very similarly described object at Lowell Elementary School. And Sharon Stoll is out there on the playground with her sister Robin, and other students are out there, of course, and they see this egg-shaped object. And it's getting lower, and it's doing this kind of yo-yo motion and pendulum and swinging around and showing off like they do. And it got really low at some point, scared Robin. She runs away, and Sharon's kind of fascinated. She's just staring at this thing. The sun's behind her. This is an important fact later. The sun's behind her, and she's looking up at this thing, which is glinting in the sun, when it darts off. And she goes back to class and starts to feel unwell. She's not feeling very well and goes to the nurse because her face is on fire. It's hurting. And the nurse is like, oh my God, we need to get you to the hospital right now, because her eyes were swelling up and her face was bright red. And so they took her to the hospital, and she was diagnosed with, I believe it was second-degree burns. Her eyes almost swelled shut. She had a lot of difficulty seeing. Her face hurt. She had to have lotion, wear dark sunglasses, and they sent her home. She had a headache. There was something going on here. And it wasn't her looking up into the sun or anything, because it was the other direction. And over the next few days, her sight slowly returned to normal, and her burns subsided. But over the next 2 to 3 weeks, she became unaccountably mature. She grew 2 feet, I believe it was.
What?
Yes, could have maybe a foot, 2 feet. I'd have to look this up to be sure, but she grew a couple of feet and became, started cooking and doing the clothes and the chores and becoming like an adult very suddenly. Freaked her parents out, let me tell you. Yeah, Blue Book looked into this. Jim and Cora Lorenzen. It was a pretty well-known case. So very strange, though. very.
That really, truly is. Wow.
There are a few cases with, physical evidence, and that's one of them.
Mm.
And some have physiological effects. Some of the kids report feeling giddy. Some feel dizzy. Some fall asleep afterwards, very strangely. Get very sleepy.
Mm.
There's one case which occurred in South Africa at, I believe it was Richmond High School. I'd have to look up the school. I believe it was Richmond High School, where this thing lands on the tennis courts of the high school. This object. This turned out to be at night, but was seen by the principal, who lives next to the school, and by 2 security guards and some people at a gas station as well. So a bunch of people saw this thing. The next morning, the principal goes over, and this is fenced in. You can't get into the tennis courts. They are tore up. They're destroyed. They later find some of the tar from the floor of the tennis courts out on this hillside several hundred yards away. The wych elm tree that's next to the tennis courts has burned leaves on it. It would later die, I believe, because of this. And some great physical evidence. There's photographs of it. Bunch of people looked at it, experts, thinking, maybe it was a cyclone, a little tornado.
Right.
No.
Did it have any radioactivity around it, or?
No, they could not figure it out. They thought maybe there was a gas explosion. No. None of the tar was overturned. It was just gone or torn up.
That's strange.
It was very strange. And it's a really good landing trace case because it was seen by multiple witnesses from 3 different locations in a fenced-in area.
Yeah. Huh.
So just so incredible. There's so many incredible cases. Keep this one from Iron Mountain, Michigan. May 6th.
We do a drum roll.
May 6th, 2002. All the students are out on the playground when this thing shows up, and it's very hard to see because it's hovering in front of the sun. And you can't look at the sun, and so it's hard to see. And they're trying to look at this thing, and everyone's quiet, and they're looking at it, and finally, it's actually a cloudy day. There's some big, bright, fluffy clouds that move in front of the sun, and boom, they can see this thing. It's large, it's metallic, and this kid is like, wow, this has riveted steel plates on it. You can see that it's made of riveted sections of metal. Very strange. So his first thought is, wonder if this is Air Force.
Right.
Which I don't think so. I'm not going to rule it out because it is strange, but this does turn up in other cases. And I just don't think that Air Force would hover over a schoolyard because this was 50 feet. This was low.
Right.
And it was right over the school.
Maybe it's done on purpose so it looks more handcrafted or something. Who knows, right?
Yeah, hard to say. But so many interesting cases. Like one lady who was a school bus driver in the Yukon in Canada and had this UFO following her school bus repeatedly for over a month when she was doing her route. How do you pronounce that? Route? And it was getting closer. And students had seen it, and it was pretty regular, and it was making her nervous, so nervous that she finally told her superiors, and I want a new route. Put me on a different route. This is
it's crowded, right?
Yeah, this is up in Whitehorse, Canada. So at any rate, she gets her new route, and it doesn't work. The UFO still follows her.
What?
Yeah.
People that keep moving thinking that they won't come, right?
Right. So she drops off all the students. The only student left is her daughter. And so they're driving home when this UFO comes barreling down out of the sky and comes right in front of them. And gosh, I'm not sure if they saw humanoids or not. I'd have to look that up. I think they did. But it was so close to the school bus, it was 20 feet away.
That's close.
Right. Not the only school bus that's been followed. And sometimes they hover over school bus stops. Freaked one poor mother out, boy, and her students. Her kids Mommy, do I have to go to school tomorrow? And she's like, yes, why? And he explained what happened. And his brother and sister are like, yeah, it's real.
Wow.
Yeah. So they're coming for our kids, but I don't think it's a nefarious thing. I really don't.
Well, does it have a correlation with our planet and the problems that, without respect to our planet? Isn't there a general theme of that or not?
Possibly. The Rua, Zimbabwe case reflects that perfectly. And apparently that did happen in the Colombia case, which I haven't been able to investigate, but apparently there were messages as well there. And that is the number one message. So I think, ultimately, if you look at what happens to people when they're taken on board, they're physically examined, and that can be very scary, but usually they're given messages. When they're given messages at all, it's about the environment or nuclear proliferation or our misuse of fossil fuels. They take people to the engine room and show them how it works, or they tell people, about their past lives, or give them psychic abilities, literally, as a gift, or awaken healing powers in them. So these are all very positive things. They seem to be concerned about our planet and have an agenda to wake people up, not only to their presence, but to our own human abilities as natural humans to do astral travel, to have precognition, to experience telepathy, clairvoyance, healing, and all the things that we can do as a fully realized human being.
And our relationship with ourself, with the planet, and then with the cosmos, right? If we're going to be a bigger perspective of who we are and why we're here.
Yeah, because we are, in effect, quarantined on this planet because we are not having open official contact. I think there's probably reasons for that. One, I'm sure, because this has been stated in a number of cases, is our own violent, warlike ways and our prejudices against people who are different. And if you look at cases like people, I say, well, why don't they land on the White House lawn? Well, they did. Very nearly. They were about to, and we chased them away with jets. And we had a policy to shoot first and ask questions later. And there have been a number of crashes where apparently we are shooting these things down.
Right.
So yeah, that's not a good idea. I believe that, I don't know if that's still going on or not. I think that policy has been, discontinued of shooting first. Because we've lost a number of pilots to these things, being just sucked up inside them. So I think we're dealing with a situation now that's pretty changeable, or pretty volatile, I guess is the word I'm looking for, in that things could change very quickly if we suddenly have a major sighting where they stay long enough for it to become conclusive.
Undeniable, right? 100% undeniable.
100%, absolutely conclusive. And we're close there because, now students do have cell phones.
Right. So do you see a more happening of them landing in and the children taking pictures, right?
Yeah, some of the most recent cases do have photographs. One of the most recent cases I found was 2018, April 2nd, at West Nusa School in Indonesia. It was like high noon, and this glowing circular object drops from the sky. It's very bright. It's bright like the sun, bright. And she whips out her cell phone and takes a picture of it, which shows just white light.
But she did it. We're there. We're almost there. And we're almost at the end of our show. And so thank you so much for coming on and sharing these amazing stories, and that I just don't understand why it's not on the front cover of every magazine all the time, right?
It should be taught in schools.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So what's your next project that's coming up that you're working on? Yeah,
it's called UFO'S at the Drive-In.
That's right. Oh my God, that's going to be so much fun.
Oh, it's hilarious.
And I love going to the drive-in. I miss it.
It's so funny, so amazing. The cases I found are just mind-blowing. I don't know why they're not more well-known, because it's the same thing as the schoolyards. Really the same pattern that I was talking about.
I never heard of it. It was not in my reality till you said that today. I didn't put those two together. It's kind of like when I first put UFOs and Sasquatch together. It was like, what?
Right.
The first time you're thinking they don't go together, but they do,
Oh, it's so interesting. They're showing themselves off to large groups of adults in these movie theaters, but not too large, not so large it's going to cause a panic. Unfortunately, it does in some cases. Oh, man. Yeah. I can't wait to get this book out.
Yeah, I'm excited. And so they can find your books on Amazon under Preston Dennett, and that's PRESTONDENNETT. They can also find you on your website, PrestonDennett.weebly.com. You have a great website. I love it. Very colorful and breaks down all your books. Onboard UFO Encounters. Is that your latest book?
Yeah, that one literally just came out. So super excited about that.
We have to have you back on and where we can record all of it and on Facebook and talk about that book as well.
For sure. Yeah, it's doing pretty well. I'm getting a great response from it. So I'm so excited.
And then you have the other one, The Healing Power of UFOs.
Yep, I think it's an important book. People got to realize that there's a huge number of very positive cases out there. You know, ETs get a bad rap, really, which is undeserved because there are a lot of very friendly cases.
And this one, you have over 300 true accounts.
Yeah, cures of everything. Some fantastic, very conclusive evidence. I mean, with before and after medical records that you can't deny it. Mm-hmm. Boy, the doctors are so upset in some of these cases. They are just
break it all open, right?
Yeah.
And then your other one, Undersea UFO Base. So thank you again, Preston Dennett, for being on the Cosmic Oracle Show. You've been just delightful.
Well, thank you
so much. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Have a good week and one another.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message. Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Any commercial advertising you may hear in this program is of the sole discretion and benefit of the host of whose program you are listening to. Revolution Radio does not endorse any commercial products, nor does it accept monetary compensation for on-air advertising of commercial products, nor will it ever. We are and shall remain 100% listener supported. Any product advertising on this program are considered used at buyer risk, and Revolution Radio shall not be held liable for any claims or damages received from any product advertised within this program. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Take a look around, kid. What do you see? Homes being foreclosed. People working 2-3 jobs just to put food on the table and still drowning in debt. Don't get me wrong. This country was founded on great ideals and principles. They've all been ruined at the banks. Open your eyes to the banks that are robbing you. You know who my favorite president was? Who? Thomas Jefferson. Because he saw all of this coming and tried to stop it. He fought the banks. JFK too, and they killed him for it. The banking institution is more dangerous than an army, he said. He also said that every generation needs a revolution, Jimmy. The American dream is just that. Just a dream. War is a continuation of politics, only by other means. Politics is a continuation of economics by other means. This is our bank. This is our war. And this is our plan of attack.
Banks have become an essential threat to our democracy. So consider this justice.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the internet. Please help support this station so this battle can continue forward. Revolution Radio! The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.